I wanted to share with you some of the thoughts that I have on the use of this particular website to learn English conversation skills for beginners. On the top here is the keys that will show you how to get into the different sections. The beginning section, the first thing is the basics that I cover with students. It's basically for the student who has difficulty or unfamiliarity with making a question. I teach them how to make questions both in the positive and negative, and the past, present, and future. Q is for question, S is for sentence. These PDFs here you can open, and they're helpful printouts that you may be able to use in your class. These are positive questions, negative questions, and then a review of that. This is the PDF of the verbatim that you find here. In this particular review, it's just you're making a question out of the sentence presented to you. We then go into the adjectives, the same scenario. I am, you are, he is, both in the present, the past, the future, both the positive and negative. The student needs to be completely familiar and at ease with the question-making skill. Do you go? Did you go? Will you go? Don't you go? Didn't you go? Won't you go? The question-making skill is a little bit more difficult than the sentence-making skill, but they have to have a command of this and familiarity with it in the very beginning. So I take as long as it takes, usually 1, 2, 3 hours at the most with a student, to familiarize themselves using these very simple printouts that you can, if you tap here, the printouts will come out, and they're useful tools for you to use to help students visualize how the question and the sentence generally is made in English with the very basic formats. There is then a quick summary of some helpful tips on how to say hello, goodbye, how to apologize, how to say thank you. These are the PDFs involved with these videos. Sometimes there's an Instagram which highlights the same patterns used to either ask a favor, ask for help, how money is talked about. So those, the PDFs are always there for you to print out, to give to your students to help them visualize what's being said. Basically, my simplistic theory here is that many beginning students know enough vocabulary to get started. It's the problem of having them put it into a question form and having them make complete sentences. The system then goes into 40 hours of a progressive, self-directed lesson plan of how patterns are used in conversation to help you express your feeling. I want to emphasize for you that patterns are the keystone of conversation. Patterns, for example, if we go to hour 1, at the beginning of every hour, you'll find this PDF symbol here, and if you open it, it will show the student what you're going to study every hour. As you see, there's only about 8 to 12 patterns that are studied in each hour, but each of them involves a different feeling. And the question form, once again, is asked. The sentence, in the complete sentence, I have the student answer. At the beginning, it may seem too simple, but as we go along, these patterns are joined together. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 patterns used in one sentence. The vocabulary will be very, very, very easy, but putting the patterns together to express your feeling is the crux of the problem. Helping the student to express their feelings. I'm not there to be a glorified dictionary for them. If they want to know what a particular word is translated, there's dictionaries that will tell them that. I'm there to help them show in a big picture how conversation develops and how to easily manipulate conversation and control conversation with the native speaker. And you do that through the use of patterns, because we unconsciously use these patterns to, once again, convey feelings. So, for example, here in the first hour, which is right here, at the beginning, there's always the patterns being introduced. The first hour here only has 6. V is the verb. We start with the verbs first, then move on to adjectives later, then to the complex sentences. So we first want to get them familiarized with the easier patterns, how to make the question, which is done in the introduction. Once again, the PDFs are always meant as a helpful aid for the student to help them picture what you're trying to teach them. And when I ask a question, I expect them to answer in a full sentence, not just a simple yes, I do, no, I don't. Native speakers do that out of a strength in the language. Beginners usually do it out of weakness. There's a segment in the beginning of the first 10 or so hours where I have you, and this is me. If you were to be sitting right in front of me, how I would teach you. It then goes through a variety of different YouTube exercises that will help you to learn to speak. The basic theory here is that you learn to speak by speaking. You have to get used to having the words roll off of your tongue, hear yourself speaking, constantly reinforce it. So what we have here is only the first hour here is the one where I will do most of the talking. After that, it's all going to be me asking a question or giving you a sentence, and you'll be asked to reply or repeat it. You speak as much as I speak. You know, if you... I have a bias against English programs that just has the student passively listening to what you're saying. This, I'm forcing them to speak. At the very bottom, there are some exercises using photos. And generally, there are 200 questions each in these. These PDFs is if you look at them, if you tap on them, it will show the verbatim of what is in each of the videos. When the videos play, I've turned the sound off here, but if you turn the captions on these, I ask the question and the question remains up until the next question is asked. It's meant to be an aid for beginning students to rely on as they become familiar with the pattern and begin to use it. They'll won't need to look at the captions. But initially, if they choose to use that, they can. So basically, I ask the question here, and then there's time allotted as this video is going for them to answer that question. Will she need to wash her clothes? The answer is she will need to wash her clothes. Very simple. So there's enough time there for them to answer the question. Because the question-making skill is more difficult than the sentence-making skill, you can also have the student just repeat the question. After I ask it, will she have to weigh the food? The student says, she have to weigh the food? You're listening to what is said and you're answering. Now, in the classroom atmosphere, of course, you'll be able to hear whether they make mistakes and be able to correct them. But you'll find that most all of the vocabulary in here is very simple, and they should be able to, they should already know it for many of them. Once again, I'm not here to teach vocabulary to them. Most of this vocabulary they will already know. So there's about 15 photos in each of these photo segments. We then move on to the second hour. Once again, here are the patterns involved, the intro, and then all these different exercises. Some exercises you may find more helpful than others. Once again, at the bottom, you'll find these photo themed question and answer segments. At the bottom, you'll also find teacher's tips. This is meant, of course, for the teacher. It tells them how I would teach that particular hour. Once again, helpful PDFs are involved here. You'll begin to notice here that we begin to combine what we've learned. If it's worth learning, it's worth reviewing. So in the second hour, we have reviews of the first and the second hour. This is just a review of patterns that were learned in the second hour. This begins to review these 2 hours together. And you can see as we go along, for example, if we go, let's say, to hour 10, there's always the introduction. These are only what we're learning in hour 10. These require review of the patterns learned in hours 1 through 10. Once again, 1 through 10. These are the part of that group of patterns that we've learned. The photo opportunities, once again, are available. So this continues on, as you can see, from the first 15 hours, then we go 30, and then through to the 40th hour. The patterns look simple, but as you progress from the beginning, you begin to combine patterns. As I said before, in a sentence or a question, you may combine 3, 4, 5 of these patterns within one sentence. So you have to get your ear trained to listening for them because they're conveying feelings subconsciously conveyed by the native speaker. And you want to pick up on those feelings and answer back with the same feeling. If somebody asks you, do you want to go? And you answer, I plan to go. It's a different feeling. Do you want to go? Yes, I want to go. Or I don't want to go. Give them back the same feeling. I would highly suggest that you take these in sequence. You can't just come into the program and say, well, I'm going to start with hour 12, because there'll be patterns in here which you may not be familiar, and you'll begin to stumble over them a bit. The more you speak, the more you hear, the more comfortable you'll be with the language. So it's a basic process. You go at your own pace, Everybody is different. Some are fast learners, some are slow learners, but everybody crawls before they walk, before they run. So these exercises are meant to help you to tune your abilities to hear the patterns and repeat those patterns, which are conveying feelings, back to the native speaker. As you go along, you'll find that the patterns, when you go towards the end here, let's say hour 35, this, for example, is verbatim of questions on that photo there. You'll see that the sentences get longer, the questions get longer. So if you're familiar with the patterns that you've already learned, they become like second nature. You're not stumbling over them. And it's just a fun way to learn English because it brings you up to speed quite quickly. If you're trying to learn a lot of vocabulary, it's not only boring, but the beginner doesn't know what vocabulary is used the most. They need a teacher to give them a method to focus their attention. And this is the way that I focus their attention on what is the most commonly things they will hear when the native speaker talks to them. This section here where you see this writing, which is in Korean, is the 40 hours that I used to teach my niece when she came. And these are the same hours and patterns in hour 11 that are in this part here. But it shows me teaching my niece. These are the helpful PDFs. And because I'm teaching my niece, there's a little bit of Korean that I speak in this section. But you'll get an idea of how we run through the patterns. And the PDFs here will have both the English and the Korean. So if you're a Korean, you can benefit a great deal from that part. This section here, patterns and topics. The patterns is the initial book that I wrote about 25 years ago. If you tap here, this is the PDF of the book. If it's about 100 and so pages. Personally, I think books are a bit boring to look at. If you're with a native speaker, you should use them to help you speak. You don't want to read with a native speaker. You want to speak. The teacher should be giving you the atmosphere, giving you the venue to speak, not to just read. But if you want to look at the book, it's there for you. For the more advanced students who just want conversation topics to practice their skills after they finish this whole process, and they have other people in a group that they can talk with to practice their skills. This book contains 44 topics with a variety of different questions and a format to facilitate that teaching atmosphere. All of the videos that you find on the website are found in the podcasts, a free podcast, which are found in Apple or Podbean, Podkicker. This is a Korean one here. If you need to contact me, at the end here, there's information. I hope it's been helpful. Should you have any questions, feel free at any time to contact me. Thank you.